Well, as you can't help but know by now, the Queen is visiting Canada. It's all part of celebrations of her 50 years on the throne. For some Canadians, the royal visit raises questions about the relevance of the monarchy to Canada in the 21st century. McCullough is a member of Citizens for a Canadian Republic. He's in Vancouver. And Rafal Heydel-Mankoo chairs the Toronto branch of the Monarchist League of Canada. He happens to be in Britain right now, in London. We're so glad both of you could join us. And Rafal, let me begin with you, because the news of the day, splashed all over the newspapers, is that our Deputy Prime Minister, John Manley, has said perhaps it's time to rethink this whole thing about needing a monarchy, especially once Queen Elizabeth is done with her job in that role. What do you make of that?
Well, as a private citizen, Mr. Manley has every right to express his opinion. However, personally, I think that as a Minister of the Crown, one of Her Majesty's ministers, and as a sworn Privy Councillor, it's not only unfortunate, but it's quite distasteful for him to make such a statement, especially at the time of the arrival of Her Majesty the Queen. If he does regard her as a foreign person or as a foreign head of state, that at least is seen, in my view, as being rather discourteous to a visitor.
JJ, what do you make of it? Rafal seems to be objecting with the timing and his role. He represents not just himself, but he's the Deputy Prime Minister of the country.
Well, I think Mr. Manley is actually being quite brave because, as I'm sure you know, like what Rafal just said, a lot of times, if any member of the government so much as dares to question the monarchy, he's branded as almost being a borderline traitor to the country, which I think is just backwards. I think it is time that some big-name politicians finally express concern and maybe open up the doors for a debate, because as of now, we really haven't had the chance to express any opposing points of view.
JJ...
Well,
sorry, go ahead, Rafal.
Fortunately, Mr. Manley is isolated on this issue. Last time he came out and said a similar thing a few months ago, only Brian Tobin supported him, and Herb Gray and Colonette and a variety of other ministers stepped forward. And I believe Colonette said that John Manley was out to lunch on this issue, or words to that effect. So he really has been isolated on this subject completely.
JJ, I want to get back to you and ask you, what makes you agree so much with John Manley? You're what, 18 right now?
Yeah, 18.
And why have you decided on that the Republican model is the best one for Canada?
Well, I mean, you've got to look at Canada. And I mean, we're an independent, sovereign nation. We're in the 21st century now. I think it's time to get rid of these antiquated notions of having a foreign monarch having a colonial British leader. It's just irrelevant to today's society. Canada needs to have a Canadian head of state, hopefully one that was elected in some form, one who can represent all people of Canada and who can represent Canadian values and represent Canada to visitors abroad. Not a monarch who lives in London, visits the country occasionally once every 4 or 5 years. That's just not coherent with Canada's values.
Rafal, are we hanging on to our colonial past?
Not at all. We are an entirely separate and independent state. What we have is a Queen of Canada, styled as such by Parliament in 1953. The Crown has served this country so well. We are one of the world's oldest democracies, and I think it's a sign of maturity for a nation which is as old as us. Only 3 other nations have older democracies than us, and it's not a sign of maturity to start tinkering and tampering with a tried and true formula. The monarchy has been through with this country since the very beginning. We are Canadian. It's evolved. As our parliamentary system and legal systems have evolved in uniquely Canadian ways, so too has the Crown, and it's served us well. So I see no reason to tamper with it.
JJ, a lot of people would argue, and I say a lot of people because you're going to see over the next week, as the Queen goes through the country, thousands, tens of thousands of people coming out just to take a look at her, that this is what makes us distinct from the U.S., that if we went to a Republican model, that we would be absorbed by American culture even quicker than we are right now. What do you say to that?
I think that is just one of the most ridiculous debates of all. I mean, you look at the world, you look at Italy, you look at Germany, you look at Israel, you look at thousands of countries all over the world, all have presidential systems. I don't think anyone accuses, like, the Italians of being subsidiary or the Finnish. A Republican system is the majority system in this world. It's a much more democratic system because it allows the people to decide who they want as their head of state. It doesn't make us more American. It makes us more Canadian to have a Canadian as a head of state, a president, an elected official, rather than a queen who lives in a foreign nation.
Rafal, go ahead.
Sorry, being a monarchy is not antiquated. The UN always lists its list of the top 10 nations in which to live. And if you look at that list, according to the Human Standards of Living Index, 8 of those top 10 countries are monarchies. Only the USA and Iceland are on there as being republics. Japan, Norway, Sweden, the UK, Australia, Canada, they're all on this list. Being a monarchy does not mean that we're antiquated. Constitutional monarchies are very progressive, very democratic. No one says that Sweden or Belgium are not democratic countries. What we do have is this colossal behemoth beneath us. And people like Manley are very keen on adopting American qualities. But there are some of us who like to say, no, we are Canadian, we have our own proud heritage, and we will not assimilate into something which we regard as being rather less than what we have here.
Well, there's nothing wrong with a monarchy in theory if the monarch is from that country and lives there. Like the Belgian monarchy or the Dutch monarchy, that is a person who was the king of Belgium, was a person who was born in that country, represents Belgian views. The Queen of Canada is not a Canadian. She does not represent Canada. She represents the old English, upper-class British aristocracy, which is something that Canadians cannot relate to, and she doesn't represent Canada. A Canadian head of state could represent Canada, someone born in this country who has Canadian values.
The Queen of Canada is... Sorry.
Go ahead.
The Queen of Canada is Canadian. All of our laws are tied to the sovereign. And the monarchy is more than just the Queen. The monarchy is the crown. We have a Governor-General. We have 10 Lieutenant Governors. And these are the people whose job it is to represent Canada along with our sovereign. And we have a shared monarch. We share our monarchy. And I think it's wonderful in this era of globalization to have the knowledge that we have a monarch that we share with people in the Caribbean, with Australia, and with so many other nations. It's wonderful, I think, and creates this family union.
All right. Thank you both very much. And thank you both for your thoughtful comments. One thing that we can be sure of is that this debate goes on for the next generation as well. Rafal in London today and JJ in Vancouver. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.